Wait, alright, there we go. Alright, so everybody's talking about their mothers, and I figured it might be a nice moment to talk about my dad. Just kidding, I'm black, I don't know my father. You didn't laugh at that, you're racist. No, I'm going to talk, of course, about my mother, and a lot of the things that I inherited from my mother. My mother was a squat, white woman with bright white hair. She had me at 40 and had these bright fire engine red glasses that there's only one known photo in existence to prove that she ever actually took those glasses off. I inherited the eyesight. I did not inherit my mother's sense of fashion. My mother, what she lacked in either physical prowess or eyesight, she made up for in just pure creativity. So as a child, when I wasn't behaving appropriately and I decided I needed to stand in the middle of every clothes rack and jump out at my mother or any other mother that happened to be shopping for clothes, my mother didn't spank me like a regular child. She instead confided in me. She sat me down and she said, "Lance, do you see that man over there? He told me, if he sees you without me one more time, he's going to steal you." So the art of junior mean girlsing was something I learned from my mother at a very, very young age. My mother also gave me half of her industriousness. We grew up very poor, and I never really knew, but a lot of my favorite memories now seem kind of odd. I never realized in the winter in Michigan when it got too cold, we would huddle around the oven and make shoestring potatoes. I now realize that potatoes are very cheap. Cutting them in shoestrings is free. And we would sit around the warmth of an oven and douse them in ketchup, and my mother and my sister and I would eat shoestring potatoes. My mother's love of ketchup, which is now my love of ketchup, is from her father, who is super fucked up, so I kind of dodged a bullet in that one, that I just got the ketchup, but not like the really fucked up one. Which is great. My sister, however, inherited way cooler things than I did, like not the love of ketchup. My sister actually got a blanket that my mother knit, and it was this brown and white blanket, and my sister took everywhere. She called it her Michael Jackson blanket, because that was her childhood hero. I never got a Serena Williams blanket, but I guarantee you I would have worn the shit out of it everywhere I went. My sister also got a blanket of her college colors, because she was the first person in our family to ever go to college. By the time I went to college, my mother was too ill to knit anything. At the age of 11, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal liver disease, which one of the more horrific things she may have given me is the fact that, like porn, we won't know if I have the disease till I see it. That was a smart joke, damn it. So the great part about growing up with a sick parent is that you become industrious. I'm sorry, I used industrious already. You become self-sufficient immediately. I was taking myself to school, I was getting my own homework done. I was the 11-year-old who got himself to soccer practice because I had to. So I never had a rebellious phase. That is in some contention that I may have had a rebellious phase. My family did take one beach trip to the Thumb, which is the part of Michigan shaped like a thumb. That's why it's called that. Get a map. And my sister and I went looking for Petoskey stones and just kind of playing on the beach. When we got back to the umbrella, my mother was asleep. But she was the kind of a sleep that you don't wake up from. While my sister and I were out being children, my mother, her liver had shut down and pumped a series of toxins to her brain, and she had slipped into a coma. So I wouldn't call what I did rebellious so much as frugal. I knew we couldn't afford to stay in the Thumb any longer, and I knew selfishly that I didn't want to stay in a hospital that I didn't know very well. So I convinced my sister the best plan of action was to drag my mother's lifeless body to the car and drive 3 hours to my hometown hospital, which I knew very well. I had a room that was not too far away from it, had all my own ketchup, and could do my own homework. Probably not what you should do in that situation, by the way. However, my mother developed a great sense of dignity and grace as her condition worsened. When I came out, she handled it great for an extremely Lutheran woman, which is why we do say mother, whoever brought that up earlier. And on her best days, I would take her on a walk all the way to the corner. On great days, we could make it all the way around the block, and she would use this time to really discuss these kind of existential thoughts of what life and dying was like. And she would ask me these really gentle questions and say, "Lance, "Do you have a girlfriend? Is her name Mike?" And so I really hope one thing I will inherit from my mother is the ability to tell incredibly sweet, incredibly insensitive jokes to my children. My mother also left the bathroom door to tell stories, or she left the bathroom door open when she told stories, so there's a sense of shamelessness that I'll get whether I like it or not. So 7 years after all of this happened, my mother finally made it to the top of this transplant list. And when you are on the top of a transplant list, go bags are packed, last goodbyes are done in advance, and you start attending classes. At one of these classes, we learned that you don't necessarily get an organ based on somebody who's your same gender or anything like that. It's as long as they're your same size and a blood match, that might happen. So my mother, for instance, might get the liver of a teamster who was in an unfortunate accident, in which my mother explained to the entirety of the University of Michigan medical staff, "You are not putting a union liver in me." So bad timing and sass are definitely something my mother gave me. The night of my mother's actual transplant, I don't really remember getting a call that I needed to be in Ann Arbor, and I honestly didn't get to speak to my mother before she was under anesthesia. I had been in this hospital so long, and it was such a part of my life that my sister and I had named the waiting rooms. There was Ben, there was Jen, and there was Gwen in the ICU. This was in the mid-2000s, in my defense. And we figured out how to make intra-hospital phone calls, and we would call each other. And I sat in Gwen, and she'd call me from Ben, and we would just pretend to talk about anything other than whether or not we were orphans yet. And I ended up vacating my room that night to a grieving family, and I slept against a vending machine in the lobby. And about 9 a.m. the next morning, doctors, who keep a very professional stone face, as they must, called us into the room, and they explained that my dignified, graceful, loving, blanket-knitting, ketchup-loving, union-bashing, sassy-mouthed, poor-timing, tough-as-fucking Flint survived that transplant. My mother survived that transplant. Like, fucking yeah! That was not supposed to happen, guys. That was not supposed to happen. And my sister and I, of course, did the immediate thing to run upstairs and take a picture of my mother, who is unconscious and yellow and has tubes down her throat and wires up her nose and someone else's liver inside of her. And she always wanted that photo because she wanted to know that every day after that wasn't her worst day. And it's really one of the only things, after she gave me so much, it's one of the only things I was able to give to her. It's also the only photo that proves she did take off the red glasses. After that, man, I have missed a lot of college, guys. Like, I was still supposed to be in college. And so I went back, and I flirted with boys, and I learned what Natty Light was, and I went back to classes, and I would talk to my mother on the phone when I had a chance, and she said she was keeping herself entertained, and she was happy, and it was exciting, because instead of being her parent and taking care of her, she was taking care of herself, and I was taking care of myself, and she even got to call and ask how I was doing sometimes. And weeks went by, and I got a package in the mail, and it was this huge package, and it was incredibly light, and my roommate came home that night and found me just sobbing into what was my own college-colored knit blanket. And how can you explain to anybody that your parent had finally found a way to literally give you everything? Thanks.